Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Lizzie Archer, and I'm the program coordinator here at Open AIR. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce Kaylene Big Knife. Kaylene is joining us as part of our Indigenous Initiatives speaker series. And so she is the featured artist for January, and we will continue on throughout the spring featuring artists. A few quick housekeeping things. I will be admitting people as they come in, and I will also be muting folks just so that way we can focus on Kaylene's presentation. If at any point you have a question, feel free to pop it in the chat. And Kaylene will be stopping throughout her presentation periodically to take a peek and look at questions and address them then. At the end of her presentation, we'll also have some time for questions and discussion. This call is being recorded, and so if you have to leave early for any reason, we will have the complete recording listed on our YouTube page. That's where we have our archive of all artist presentations of Open AIR's past are on the YouTube page. So you'll be able to see Kaylene's as well as our other presenters. I think that is it for right now. I really appreciate you being here and taking the time on this. In Missoula, it's like a very moody Wednesday. And so hopefully you, can enjoy and relax. And Kaylene, thank you so much. I'm going to hand it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lizzie. So yes, please get comfortable. Grab your tea. If you're sitting on your bed or couch, get comfortable. I'm really excited to be here. As Lizzie said, my name is Kaylene Big Knife. I am from Rocky Boy, Montana, which is the home of the Chippewa Cree tribe. I mentioned earlier, for those that joined later, that I currently reside in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. So just over the mountain pass from where my family is from. So I do visit throughout the year. So I'm very excited to be talking more about my career, specifically as a graphic designer, and how I grew into my art style. And then, later on, we're going to get into some really fun topics. But I will go ahead and start the presentation by sharing my screen. Alrighty, so let me go ahead and get my slideshow started. Alrighty, so the title of this presentation is called Rocky Boy and High Resolution. My path is a Chippewa Cree graphic designer. It's part of the Open AIR Indigenous Art, Indigenous Minds speaker series. So jumping right in, we're going to be talking about how I came to be as a graphic designer, because I can tell you one thing, it wasn't always this linear. And so I have these 8 points in my life that I felt like were very key moments in my life that helped me on my trajectory as a expert graphic designer. So we'll be going through these in more detail, but I just kind of wanted to give you guys an outline, like a whole view of Kaylene's life in the last 15, 16 years, which I have been practicing graphic design for. So we're going to be talking about my foundation and my endless source of inspiration. Surprise, it's Rocky Boy, if you guys are wondering. I graduated high school in 2010, and that's kind of when my art career, I feel like my art career started. So we're in 2026, so it's kind of crazy to think it's been that long, but I went to art school for these 3 years at the Institute of American Indian Art, so point 3. Point 4, I jokingly put as the dark ages, but it was also the learning ages in my life, and I look forward to discussing that with you. In 2016, there was a pivotal moment in my art career, and it's titled A Pair of Earrings That Changed It All. So I look forward to showing you a picture of the earrings in question. Point 6, I officially opened K Big Knife Design, which is my creative business that I operate under. And then the next 5 years after that, 2027 to 2022, I feel like that's when I really defined my graphic design career, from either taking on art grants or, working full-time as an artist, and even doing some language revitalization projects with my tribe and my tribe's college, Stonechild College. So that was a very defining moment of my life. And currently, so 2023 to current, I'm primarily working in marketing now. And so I look forward to discussing that part of my life with you, like recently, like what I'm doing and how, mastering marketing is elevating my graphic design experience. So it's a very quick overview. So we're going to go ahead and jump into the next slide. So my foundation and endless source of inspiration. So the name for Rocky Boy is Asiniwati Sig. Asiniwati Sig. And that's not to be confused with the person, Chief Rocky Boy, aka Chief Stonechild. And this is where I'm from. I grew up in Rocky Boy with my mom's side of the family. So growing up running through the hills with my grandma's house, like even in my dreams, like that's usually where I am, or like I go home is like my grandma's house. So grew up running up and down the hills. And then the picture over to the left, I'm in the pink. And there's my older sister in the purple, and then there's my brother. And it might not look like it in this picture, but these two are like my ride or dies. So you can see the same mountain kind of right behind my sister. It's called Centennial. So it looks like kind of like a sleeping bear. And on the right side, on the right picture, you can kind of see like the pointed ear, and even down where like the hip and shoulders, or shoulders and then hip, and then where the foot and the ankle is. So anyways, every time I see that mountain, it's home for me. So my mom is Chippewa Cree from Rocky Boy, and my dad is Mexican from Mexico. So a little bit of what's it called, layered and braided history and heritage. And so I'll primarily be speaking about my Chippewa Cree experience, but there'll be touches of some of like my artwork exploring some of my Mexican heritage as well. So anyways, I like to throw a little kid picture because it's hard to imagine, when you see somebody who's either like an expert at what they do, and then you see a little cute picture of them. And, not that I don't like pink, but I'm like, I'm not a pink floral girl anymore. So times have changed. So another source of my inspiration is actually just looking at photos. I have this photo here of my on my maternal side, my great grandfather, Big Knife, and this is where our family name comes from. And so I wanted to pull some of these images up and close to really appreciate, to do a little bit of art appreciation from the Chippewa Cree tribe, because honestly, sometimes this is like the only reference or look I have at defining what Chippewa Cree art looks like. So here's a picture of Big Knife on the very left side as a young man, and then over on the right next to that is him as an older man. So I pulled some close-ups of like his hat design, which I was digging, and then if you can see some of these like leaves and florals on his vest, they are so amazing, and I've actually incorporated some of these designs into my work later in life. So you have this like three-pointed leaf. I'm referring to the image like in the center, if you can see my mouse. So there's like this three-pointed leaf. You can see some of the veins, and I like love that. Like every time I look at this picture, it's just incredible to see these floral shapes. And right below that, there is a 5-petal. It's hard to see, but there's like 3 dark petals and then 2 lighter petals in between those. So there's like a 5-petal tulip. I don't want to call it a tulip, but it is a floral design. And right below that, and this is like one of my favorite, you can't quite see it, but it's a 4-petal flower with some scallop designs on top, and then it has 2 leaves on each side. So anyways, I can just nerd out about some like old photos and just seeing like some of their old designs. And over to the right, Chippewa Cree artisans and bead workers back then actually didn't quite have access to beads, so they would use sequins. So you can see his like gauntlet with I don't want to call it gauntlet, like a cuff with fringes, and it has like some tulip and floral designs and scallops. It's just like so incredibly pretty. I'm actually going to move this out of the way so you guys can see that. So you can see some of these tulips and leaves and some of these other florals. Anyways, I could nerd out, and I just wanted to show you some of these design inspirations because they do influence my work. So I'm going to jump on to the next slide. So this is the art style that I'm like currently known for. I do a lot of like bold colors. Like the more colors I have, the better. I like to test how far digital art can go as far as like blending gradients and then layering upon layering. Having, you know, some of my flowers are art pieces with multiple outlines, 2-3 bold thick outlines of different colors. Adding different glow effects, and I love my polka dots. I don't have too much on here, but I love layering polka dots on some of my stuff. And so, yeah, this is the style that I am most known for, but it wasn't always that way. So we're actually gonna go screeching back to 2010 when I first started to get into art. So this is like senior year. My senior year was like 2009 to 2010, and for those that don't know me personally, I'm very much a nerd and I love like Japanese pop culture. So it was no surprise that it was very much into like anime and Japanese culture. So this is the type of stuff little Kaylene was drawing at like 17, 18 years old. My very first job in digital art or graphic design was when I was 17. I took a print shop assistant. I was a print shop assistant, and I did it just for 2 summers. And during those 2 summers, I realized I could take my hand-drawn images, scan them or take photos, import them into Photoshop, and I could add some sort of digital aspect to them. And I would even get crafty because at this time I was really into scrapbooking as well. And you can see on the first image of the geisha, I actually scanned in like origami paper and like masterly like cut it out to fit within my hand-drawn lines. So I was into like artwork like that. But at this point in my in my life, this experience like woke something up in me that's like I really love combining my hand-drawn art with some sort of digital component. So really getting into like digital art. So this is what kind of like what's it called, influenced my decision to go to art school. So center picture is a self-portrait. It's horrible, I know. And then I was really into Kite Kubo's work. So this is bleach. And then here's some other pictures of that time of like the art I was creating. And then this picture on the left with me with horribly photoshopped like energy balls is terrible. It's like my senior photo. I was a box elder lady bear. And so just again, experimenting with taking photos, cutting them out. I have the same origami paper technique. I have a hand-drawn bear in the back, and it has like a volleyball head because I played volleyball at that time. And then blue and yellow because that was our school colors. Anyways, it's very funny to come back to this photo. In fact, I enjoyed putting these slides together because it's been like 15, 16 years, and I'm like, you know what? I appreciate little Kaylene for getting the ball rolling. So. And the next 3 images were just, again, taking hand-drawn pictures, importing them into a scanned photo into Photoshop, and just adding either some sort of digital component to it or touching it up in Photoshop. So anywho, this is the type of things that Kaylene Big Knife was into when she was like 17, 18 years old. So after this point in my life, I decided to go to art school. And so I traveled to Santa Fe, New Mexico. My family, my mom, drove me down, dropped me off, and I literally just survived. And art school at the Institute of American Indian Arts really just honed in on how to draw. Although I did have some experience, again, it pulled me away from more of that anime influence and really forced me to learn the elements of design, whether that was line or shape, texture, spacing, color theory, and just like drawing 101 and figure drawing. So this is some of the art pieces I did for class assignments for that particular time in my life. again, just honing in on how to draw the elements that make up a good art piece and that type of thing. And I continue to explore digital art as well and how to layer photographs. The first picture on the left, a buffalo, I hand drew the buffalo, just the outline. I have some, it's hard to see, but those painted triangles in the back, those are hand painted. The beaded dream catcher was something my sister made, so I took a picture, altered the colors, and so this is just an example of me layering photos and hand-drawn elements on top of each other and just creating work out of just photos. The centerpiece, I mentioned exploring my Mexican heritage. This was part of that. This is actually a photo of myself, and I converted it into a digital drawing in Photoshop and went in and inked some of the parts. So I also experimented with animation, still can see that anime influence, but like, you know, simple animation like closing the eye, or even just barely moving aspects of either it was like a person, or even I did an animation of like a fly flying. So really into just like simple hand-drawn step-by-step animation. And I even got into 3D modeling and animation in a software program called Maya. So this was a Japanese lantern, and I created it from scratch and was experimenting with different lighting elements and colors. So anyways, lots of experimentation, but still having that heavy influence in graphic design and digital art in general. Towards the end of my tenure at I really got into watercolor. And so here's some of the stuff, again, still anime influence, but really getting into different techniques with watercolor, whether it was dripping watercolor and as well as ink. I was really into India ink at the time. So really quick synopsis of kind of like the shenanigans I was doing at art school. But those 3 years, when I look back at it, really, really set me up for success. And at that time, it's hard to see, but really laid that foundation of understanding art in its very basic components. So my love for watercolor actually carried over into the dark ages of my life. So now we're in the dark ages. And I call it the dark ages because after art school, I came back home. I moved back home to Montana, and I really didn't have a sense of direction, I guess. I wasn't convinced anymore that I should be an artist or that I should even consider it a career. So I started to think of things like, oh, maybe I should be an accountant. Maybe I should go do this, you know? And so I continued to take classes at a local college, MSU Northern, which is in Havre, Montana, and continued just to take art courses. And I mentioned that although these were the dark ages, they were also the learning ages. So this is where I really honed in on learning Adobe Creative Cloud software and elevating my work to where it is now. But looking at some of these pictures, these are some watercolor. So the one on the left with like the rainbow smoke was just stuff I did on my own to further explore watercolor and ink. And then the next two were class assignments. One was a portrait of a classmate, one of my classmates. And then, oh, one second, I didn't know that was down there. And the other one is a portrait of my brother. So those two were class assignments. So still very much love to draw and to really create. And some of these classes I was taking, I was in class with my sister. So that was really fun to me to actually go to college with my sister, create art classes. And, you know, I fondly remember we would go to the library and get like a latte and then like go to class with our art pieces in hand. So it was a fun time. Like these, I do have very endearing memories. It's just I had no creative direction as to like, what does even an art career look like, you know? So again, the learning ages and the dark ages were very synonymous in my life. And so these are some of those first vector. This is when I started to get into vector art. So vector art is Adobe Illustrator specifically. And this first one is a very endearing project. I remember going and sitting in the computer lab until like 9 or whatever at night working on it, because it was like this first like aha moment, like, oh, okay, I see why vector art, instead of, you know, using Adobe Photoshop like I was using, you know, makes more sense for something like this. So this cute little assignment, as some of you can tell, was for, so our assignment was to create, we had a museum exhibit going on, and they had little mini exhibits with different topics. So number 1, and you had to number them. So number 1 was a dinosaur. So there's my really loose interpretation of a velociraptor. 2 was like the ocean and the sea. So I have 2 of them there. 1 looks like a seashell, and the other 2 is like water and waves. 3 was like caveman, Neanderthals. And so I had like a spear. 4 was animal and an animal exhibit. So I have like this giraffe with like a 4 as a head. 5 was the Ice Age. 6, which is the rose, was like botany. 7, as you can tell, was like insects. 8 was like Egyptian. So I did a really like loose interpretation of like a tomb. And 9 was a gem crystal exhibit. And then 10 was like fossils. So this was one of those assignments that really, like, I feel like set me on the right path. Like, I was actually very excited about it. And then following 2 art pieces you see with like the star quilt design and cross, as well as like the character, were kind of some of my very first all vector illustrations. And this is where I started to really see the power of vector art, which is what I currently create. So on to the next slide. And the Dark Ages was actually the Dark Ages too, because at this time I did technically drop out of college. I was going into my 5th year of college, and again, not having really any direction as to how an art career would look as a full-time career. And so I ended up dropping out, but I also got my first like full-time job. I worked for the White Sky Hope Center for my tribe, which is my tribe's chemical dependency center. And so some of these projects started to come out from that. And again, using vector art. And for the first time, I realized like, okay, I see how vector art and digital art can really help promote things that are good in my community, as well as advertise events. So these first 2 graphics with the eagles was something I did for like our, one for like White Sky Hope Center's logo. 2, it was kind of like this holistic holistic understanding of like Nehiawag, which is the 4-bodied people and our life cycle. So that's the centerpiece I'm talking about. And then the last piece was kind of my first iterations of poster design. So I started doing poster design much later in life, and that's what I was like doing for a long time. So these were some of my first iterations of like actual projects used for a job. So I started to grasp that a little bit better. And as I said, yes, I was still drawing anime. So I'm not going to go into these too extensively, but some of these were, you know, hand-drawn, later converted into digital. The centerpiece was like a portrait, and then what's it called? The last 2 were just like for fun. Like I, at this time in my life, drew a lot on my downtime, which is something that I can really appreciate now. But I do see a question in the chat. Lizzie, could you, I saw it was about vector art. I think you're on mute. Okay, sorry.
Okay, so the question is, can you explain what vector art is? I understand Photoshop, but not vector.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm going to go back to this slide. So vector art, pretty much you could achieve the same effect in Photoshop. Like I could have drew these in Photoshop and got relatively the same result. However, vector art, I could, like this little tiny graphic on all of them, I could stretch like as big as like a football field or a wall, and it will be the same like crisp lines, versus Photoshop, which works in pixels. So pixels are basically, if you ever seen, like if you zoom really close in on a picture, you see that they're just little tiny squares of color, and that makes up the full, and you back out and you see like the full photograph, and it's very beautiful and has like a high range of color and definition. Although vector art at that time wasn't quite close to it, it has come a long way. So you can do a lot of these really beautiful bleeds of color, like gradients. But yeah, vector art basically can be resized to any size without losing resolution. Whereas in Photoshop, if you tried to make it bigger, it will pixelate, or, yeah, basically that's the difference. Vector can be resized to any size without losing any of its quality. Whereas if you worked strictly in Photoshop, it will become pixelated and lose quality the larger you go. So anyways, I hope that answered your question. All right. Thanks, Mary. Okay, so this next point in my life, this pivotal moment, is called a pair of earrings that changed it all. For those who do know me, I love earrings. I easily have like 150, maybe even 200 pairs that I own. And I have like art installations on my wall of just all my earrings. Anyways, I even make earrings. So I love earrings. And so lo and behold, I was shopping for earrings one day, and I came across this particular pair, and I regretfully did not buy it. But just admiring the florals, it was titled Chippewa Blossoms, and it was a Beyond Buckskin boutique, which is still in operation today, by an artist called named Mia B. Fly. And I knew of her work. But this particular pair of earrings caused me to pause and ask, what are Chippewa Blossoms? Which Chippewa was a play on words, and in the description it said Chippewa Blossoms. And so I was asking myself, is that even a thing? Like, is Chippewa Blossoms, what are those? And so 1,000 internet searches later, I found that not only is it an art style technique that has been practiced for like eons, there was also another art style from what's it called? From the Ojibwe, which Ojibwe is synonymous with Chippewa, which is synonymous with Anishinaabe. Those three names I use interchangeably because they are the same. What's it called? So these Chippewa Blossoms come from a direct art style that is characteristic from Ojibwe communities called the woodlands. And so this particular discovery made me realize that there were florals that were part of like my tribe's heritage. And for some reason, even after having access to photos, like I missed the memo. And so we're talking this year's like 2016, 2015. And I'm like, where was I? So up until this point, nobody really saw florals in my work, although I did kind of experiment with them. This pair of earrings led me to discover that there was an actual name for my style, and for this particular style that I would later categorize as my work. So Chippewa Blossoms. So after that moment, going forward, Kaylene, the Chippewa Cree floral maker, was born. So 2016 is when you really started to see a lot of my floral work come to life. And these were some of my first iterations of floral work, whether it was a poster or, these centerpieces I made as tattoos. And then, the hummingbird design, I, gifted it to my friend Michelle Kip to do embroidery work. So she still uses that design today. So you might see some of her purses come out with some of those design, or this particular design. So anywho, this is, again, this very pivotal moment of defining what florals were and how they related to my tribe. Gets me very excited. So from this point on is when you start seeing florals in my work. So at this time, so after I did say I dropped out of college, I did later go back in 2015 and graduated in 2017. And then that fall, I officially opened my business, Big Knife Design. You can see some of the iterations of my logo design. At first, it was just the little square with my name. What it represents is a keyboard, and it has that little notch where you would put your fingers on the J and the F. And so really kind of not very creative, but it was like, it worked, right? And then later I add the floral iterations to it. And then in the last year in 2025, I decided to give myself like a real business makeover and redesign my logo and do some different iterations of it to fit different needs, the different marketing needs of my business. So when I do a full logo spread, this is kind of like the things I do for it, a simplified version of it. So Big Knife design is now officially open at this point. And the next 5 years, so 2017 to 2022, is kind of when I started to define my graphic design style. And so these 5 years were very meaningful to me. I got some art grants through this time, and then I worked professionally for my tribe's college, and I was their like multimedia specialist and doing a lot of advertising for them. So really getting that real world experience. But if I could pick like 3 projects that I like did on repeat most of the time and explored during this time, and I also was in grad school at this time. So I went to grad school for language revitalization, and it was in linguistics. So really exploring like the relation of like the Cree language and design. But these were some of the 3 projects that I often got contracted to do, or I did because I wanted to. They were fun. First one was just commissions. This first project I did for Valerie Talks Different, I believe her name is. Sorry, Valerie, if you're on here and I got your name wrong. And so Valerie commissioned this piece. And then the centerpiece, I did patterns, and I really enjoyed doing repeated patterns. They're called seamless patterns, so they can be repeated infinitely and basically have no like weird grid marks happening. So, and then last but not least, I did a lot of poster work during this time in my life. Oops, I went back. So same thing, some commissions, and this is where you really predominantly start seeing the Cree language in my work. This one was for a local community member and his project, his summer project. He was doing t-shirts. The center was for Stone Child College. It means the Cree term is for Stone Child. And it was a repeated pattern that they later produced fabric on and also had on their old website design. And then again, doing poster work. So again, these 3 projects were kind of like my bread and butter. This is what I did. So I'm sure you're all wondering at this point, was Kaylene still drawing anime? And I can say not really. This is where I started to really pull heavy references from photos. And I started to do a lot of like more comic, like American comic style, and not so much like anime influence, but still having some aspects. So this first image with the snake is actually a cover design for a book by Linda Boyden titled Twitch, and it was Native Realities that published it. And so this was a book cover for that, and this was her character and like the main bad guy, so to speak, of the project, of her story. The centerpiece I did when we were all cooped up at home in 2020, and I was doing some like Halloween work. And so I was doing some like vampire-esque night sky stuff. So this was a really fun project. And then last but not least, this project I've been working on for like a very long time, since like 2018, unfortunately. But I hope to publish a book one day. Not quite a comic book because comics are really intense. I've done some just kind of like on my downtime, and they're very, very tough projects. And doing any comic artist working just by themselves that doesn't have somebody to do their line work, do the coloring, do the shading, do the text layout, and then also do like full layout with like copyright text and all of that, and then like the printing of it. It's just so much work. So I'm not saying that it won't be a comic book, but predominantly this title will probably be more of like a written story with some illustration. But this particular cover that they call us Rocky Boy and Box Elder has some anime references. It's a play on words because Rocky Boy, essentially I think of like this warrior with like rock armor, and then like Box Elder, I think of like an elder made of boxes, which is kind of a silly thing and kind of a more like anime-esque reference to a character design. Anywho, so this is the style of like art that I currently do, as like that is like comic and anime related. So I did do a little bit of, again, I did a little bit of experimentation with comics, but not quite to the extent where it's a full page of art. These were just like little comics. The title of this is Bat Doing Bird Things, and it was a play on a story about the bat being once a very beautiful bird. And so he insulted the eagle. I'm just paraphrasing the whole story. He insulted the eagle one day, and the eagle was not going to have that. So he ripped out all his feathers and stole away his pretty singing voice. And so that's how Rainbow Bird became Bat. And so Bat, trying to earn his like forgiveness or be kind again, goes and befriends the animals or the birds of Rocky Boy. So you'll see some Cree words here. And I do have this on my website, so I'm not going to pause too long here, but I did at this time, this 5 years in my life, experiment with comics, but it wasn't something that I did full time. All right, so jumping into the next slide. So currently I am mastering the art of marketing, and this is a shout out to where I currently work, which is the Intertribal Agriculture Council, which is a nonprofit. So here's some of my recent work in the last year. Our colors are brown and blue. And at this point in my life, I'm really like experimenting and learning the ins and outs of what it takes to market on a like national scale and to market from a nonprofit standpoint. Here's a couple of images of these two images on the left are some banners, and then images on the right are some social media as well as website banner graphics. So really learning both print and digital media and all types of projects in between. Like I've done trade show graphics that, you know, travel internationally. I've done like email designs, like really learning the finer things and marketing, and not so much just like a lot of these little one-offs that I was doing, whether it was like one poster here, one apparel graphic here, or one logo here. It's just all around marketing. So one of my favorite projects, before we move on to the next slide, or the next section of this presentation, I really look forward to every year, is I do a t-shirt design for the IAC staff when we have our annual conference. So these are the projects I always look forward to, is when they're custom and I can kind of, you know, play with more color instead of just our brown and blue. But anywho, I do love brown and blue color combinations. I will put that as a disclaimer, but it is nice to play with additional colors. And so these were made into t-shirt designs in the last couple of years for staff, and it's always really cool to see them like wearing it. And yeah, I will stop right there before we go into our next part of my presentation. Before I describe this, I would like to pause for questions. And Lizzie, I don't know if there's any in the chat.
So
hi, Kaylene. This is Lauren.
Hello, hello.
Hi. Sorry, I can't get on. I'm just recovering from the flu, so I apologize. But so my question is, the work you have done, and I was going to write a huge thing in the chat box, but I think this is easier just to say. The work that you're also doing, you know, you've dedicated so much of your time, so much, like more than a decade, you know, several decades, on also like your connection to art, and what is that to you? And it's in multiple ways, in multiple things. It is you know, and that's where I think it's so amazing and educational. For us who are also educators and also work with, you know, youth and youth programming, what would be a takeaway from your search of who you are, what you have done, reviving your tribes, you know, just as me, just, you know, my perspective of knowing you, you know, for I don't know, about 10 years. You know, going to college together, but like your story is remarkable, Kaylene. And so I just wanted to let you know, reviving reviving those vines and those florals is like so incredible. And then putting into like your tribe's language and connecting that into that is like also like healing your, you know, your tribe and your the future, you know, is that connection, and it's educational. What is something that you take away, like taking away from that, you know, all of that? What do you think would be great for the next you know, um generation? What do you think would be great for them to explore?
Oh, I love that question. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you for the kind words. Thank you. So for me, I think what would have helped me out back then to really have a more like defining and clear direction of art, I feel like would be just having more mentors that were artists from my community. So I had a couple of mentors. If my art teacher M is on here, hello, if he sees this recording later. But it was more along like art in general, like, and I was like exploring painting and pottery and mosaics, but not quite like florals. And yeah, nobody really introduced me to florals. As I explained, it's something I kind of stumbled onto. And then yeah, just bringing in artists from your community to talk about their art style and their sources, sharing resources of like where you find inspiration, and defining what like I know you're like from the Northern Cheyenne tribe. So what is Northern Cheyenne art? What does that look like? And that's still a question I'm trying to answer. What does Chippewa Cree art look like? And again, the closest thing I get is to old photos looking at regalia and florals from there. But nowadays,
Same here. Yeah, we have an archive. So we have an archive with our tribal college. And so, yeah, so I work with the archival, you know, director there, who is non-Cheyenne, but she does amazing work in archival, you know, organization. So, yeah, so those are really good tips. So thank you. Thank you.
yes,
Those are
thank you.
really
Thank
good
you.
ones. Thank you.
Yeah. And then like the good news is that we're in an age of like information sharing, and like most people nowadays know an Indigenous graphic designer and know a lot of their work. So I think that's pretty empowering, and just like watching what type of projects they do and just having a better like for me, even just defining what a graphic designer does day to day is so different. Each graphic designer has their own process and like their own methods and their own job style. Like it's just insane how broad the graphic design field is. But anyway, social media and like the information sharing that's happening in the digital age is phenomenal to address that.
Awesome.
Okay.
We have Catriona here has a question. Catriona, feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you. I don't know what my time limit is. I'd like to give you some background. My name's Catriona Crawford from Missoula. No tribal affiliation. I have a clan affiliation in Scotland. I'm thinking my background was in another life way long ago. I was part of the Chicago Women's Graphics Collective. We designed and printed posters, print along political and free health care lines. And, you know, our method was so antiquated that we were still two of us on a Saturday morning would set up the screens in the bathtub and put on the gel and then hold lights to expose it. And here you are with vector art, and you've opened up thoughts about how do you save the line when you design, and what does each media, it's almost like a different well, it is a different media, isn't it? It allows such use of line in a different way. And of course, line and design can be used to avoid something or enhance something. And the sense of the light of the color coming through, now that we all look at things on phones, is amazing. I love it. And I wondered, I think I have a history as a quote feminist of avoiding flowers in my background and now turning to gardening in my old age. And flowers are now very acceptable. Thanks for letting me share that comparison of timeline.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I love that or anecdote about like florals in general. Yeah, no, and for me too, like I love looking at these older photos, and like you saw the picture of my grandfather, my great grandfather, and he's like, yeah, decked out in florals. And so for me, coming from like an Indigenous perspective, like our like men past and even present are not afraid to wear florals. So to me, that's very empowering to see that be accepted across many walks of life, male and female, as well as all of the genders in between. So yeah, it's empowering. Thank you for sharing that, though. That's cool. I've seen like screen printing, and I've been wanting to get into it, and it looks so much fun, even though it's a lot of work, I'm sure.
Awesome. Thank you. We have one question in the chat.
Okay.
And then I think we can continue on.
Perfect.
This question is, are there tools that you use as a graphic designer that are new to you?
At this time, I can't quite say no. Like, I can't quite say yes, new tools. I do look forward to updates. Adobe Illustrator is always coming out, or the whole Adobe Creative Cloud suite always comes up with different updates that help streamline your process, and not AI exclusive. There's things that will help you that are not, AI related. So I always look forward to those updates. But there's a couple software programs that I would love to like further learn, and that's like Adobe InDesign. Although I have some years of experience, it's still one of those software programs that's good for books. I do really want to get back into like bookmaking. Most of my like recent language revitalization projects are just like one-pagers or posters, but I really want to get back into bookmaking and like digital PDFs and even like some interactive elements, because you can do some interactive elements in Adobe InDesign where you click on a picture and like a video will pop up. So you can get really cool effects in that. And so, yeah, I would like to get into like digital bookmaking. So, all right, I will go ahead and jump back into this. And if you guys got to leave, I feel like I'm going to go a little bit over, but there's still quite a few of my presentation left. I'm really sorry. So I'm going to jump right back in. So what is a graphic designer? And this is something I've always even now I have a hard time explaining what this is. And I didn't want to give you guys a generic response like, oh, you're a visual communicator or you're a digital literacy expert. Like those are, kind of like a given, like, yeah, you have to have that. So once you have a foundation in like a digital tool of your choice, and there's so many digital tools out there that are both free and paid services. For example, like PowerPoint and Google Slides can be a digital tool, and Google Slides is entirely free. So like, don't ever think like, oh, I have to have the most expensive industrial like creative tool to be a graphic designer. You could really use these free or low cost software programs out there to achieve really great effects. And then even like Procreate and Canva is a tool that just recently made its way, especially Canva in the last, I would say, like 2 to 5 years has come out really well, and a lot of graphic designers rely on it. So whatever tool you're comfortable with, perfect. And then having a general and technical understanding of what makes like a good poster and logo. So really having the basic, design element, or what's it called? Elements of design down. So once you have that solid like foundation, this is how I would describe my work. So in my own words, I feel like I am a master sorter of information. That might be a little pretentious, but it's when you get a lot of information, whether you're working with a client, or oftentimes I get handed like a Word document or PDF and it has a lot of writing. So you have to sort the information, whether it's a poster or whether it's feedback, and just being able to communicate their information and their story out to the public eye. So this is an example of like making banners or trade show graphics, or, even content for like social media. One of my favorite quotes is like, good design says, hey, look at me. Great design says, hey, look at this. So knowing how to master design to tell a very like information heavy project and communicating that to an audience that might be just like scrolling through the phone. And so you only have like seconds, if not less, to get their attention to stop and read what you're doing. So just being able to sort that information and output it in a way that is easily digestible and, you know, also really good looking. You don't want just like basic design, although there are occasions where really basic design works well. Knowing how to be a creative researcher. I wish I can say inspiration just comes and, you know, comes in spades, but it really doesn't. You have to know where to find your inspiration. One of my techniques is when I start a program or a project from scratch, and let's say it's a logo design and it's a particular, let's say it's a rose logo. So I'll actually look on a website, on a couple of websites. I'm like, what did other people and designers do for like a rose logo? So I'll pull multiple images and seeing how like their layout looks. I'm like, okay, I kind of like that. And what if I combine it here and there? So really knowing where to research inspiration and also research resources that you can use in your design work. And then two, just researching in general. Knowing what makes a good logo, what types of logos do, you know, best work for this person's business or organization, what kind of styles will I need, like website, digital compared to like print media. So all kinds of things, just knowing how to research and be creative with your research. And then last but not least, this is just a characteristic of the design field. I feel like is how I would describe a graphic designer, is like we are the chameleons of the art world. And what that means is from what I've noticed and how many clients I have across all types of fields, like all organizations need a graphic designer. You can be in the health field. Right now I'm in agriculture, and I would never have guessed I would be in agriculture, but here I am. And, you know, I've done like language revitalization work, so like linguistic work. I worked at a tribal college, and like I said, I was working at my tribe's chemical dependency center. So there's just so many things that graphic design can go into. So if that's like a field that any of the attendees are considering, just know like there are a lot of job prospects for this particular art field, especially in Indian countries. Sometimes it feels like there's a shortage of Indigenous graphic designers. So anywho, that's just one thing that I noticed about graphic design. And then I'm going to go ahead and get through my next part, and then we can jump into some questions. But I really want to go over some of my design. So to give people a look at my design process. So I created this piece in 2022, and I'll reveal the rest of the information, but here is the final art. So you see it looks great. And then here was the first step that I got a screenshot of, and I documented this whole process. So you can see like the before and like the first step. And I laugh because you can see over here, like there's my deer. You can see their little two-pointed ears, but I knew I wanted to put deer there. So part of my process is like first laying out just the basic outline of my main subject matter, which is this woman who is, I drew inspiration and used a reference of like the Mary statue pointing at her heart. And you can see these two circles like that are in her gown that are meant to represent my great grandma and the baby. So you can see it's very rough, but I do this step to kind of help place what I want to create and how to fit this negative space without being like overwhelming. So here's the next step. Start laying down some color, start drawing in some of my florals, start drawing in some more of my details. And this is the photo reference that I used. It was my great grandmother, Flora Stump, who is the wife of Big Knife, and she's holding my older sister. And I really love this picture. So I traced some of the outlines of her face and some of her body. I did add my own creative interpretation on it later that you'll see. But anyways, this is the photo reference that I used for this particular art piece. And that stark white background was getting me. So this next stage, I like to lay my background color, and this is where the gradients come in. And I like to see how colors relate to each other from both the artwork on the front of the art piece and then the foreground, the background I meant. So here's again, another step of me laying down some basic color and then like mirroring some of my design to take up the other part, our symmetrical side of the artwork, placing that. start layering more details on the bottom to fill up that space. I wasn't quite digging like the red leaves on the bottom, and so they were looking a little too much like fire, although they're known as fire leaves in Ojibwe art and Chippewa blossoms. And so I changed those to green, start, further refining my line work, start adding more shadows, more depth, more gradient. And then start again, these last few slides are just like me barely touching up. If you would miss it. So I just rewinded a little bit. So again, they're really hard to like, they're easy to miss, but I'm just like replaying some of these so you can kind of see like these little touch-ups that I do. And I was just like really just fine-tuning it. So this art piece, the final piece, is called Iskwewug, Anointing of Heart and Fire. Iskwewug and Cree is for women, plural. And Iskwew is very close to the word Iskuteo, which is fire, and then Uteo, which is heart. So women were thought to be like the heart of the lodge, the home. So they were like the keepers of the fire and the hearts of like not only like their families, but you can even consider it like their communities. So this was a fine art clay print, and there was only 20 of these ever made and printed. And then, yeah, I really love this picture of my great grandmother, and I wanted it to be a key aspect of this art piece, but I will stop right there for the sake of time. But I will like to open before we move on to the final stage of my presentation, I'd like to open up for conversation if anyone has any questions. If not, we will jump to the next part. Nope. Okay, perfect. Awesome. All right, guys, I promise this will be the last part of my presentation. For those that have to leave, I know it is the top of the hour, so I respect your time if you have to leave. Do not feel bad for having to excuse yourself whenever you need to go. But this is the part I'm going to enlist Lizzie's help with in orchestrating. So in the chat, I have prepared 6 very delectable topics for y'all to choose from. And so pick a door number that you would like to listen to, and whoever gets the most voted numbers in the chat, I will talk to. So I'm going to go ahead and pause there and let you guys read the topics and then put the number you wish to learn more about.
Kaylene, am I allowed to vote?
Yeah, you can vote. Of course you are allowed to vote. Okay, we have 3 4s coming in. Any other takers? 5. All right, give you guys another 30, 40 seconds to vote.
3.
All of them, I know. As much as I wanted to talk about all of them. Okay, it looks like 4 is the first one. I will do one more round of voting, so be prepared. I will come back and we will vote one more. I can only get to like 2 of these before we got to close out the presentation. Okay, so my favorite Chippewa Cree stories come from a book called The Bird Stories from one of our Chippewa Cree elders, the late Walter A. Denny. So I'll read these, guys. I'll read these two to you. Very short. The meadowlark, so the western meadowlark. A long time ago, when birds and animals and people could understand one another and talk to one another, the meadowlark was used as a messenger. At that time, people lived in different camps or villages far apart. Many times, some of the people wanted to tell their relatives something right away. There might be a village under attack. At times like those, the meadowlark was told to send the message. The meadowlark would sing out the message, and then another meadowlark would pick it up and sing out the message, and so on. That way, it did not take long for the message to reach another village. This way, the meadowlark was useful to the people of the prairie. Later, as a reward, they gave him a yellow shirt and a black necklace. To this day, the meadowlark has a yellow chest and a black ring around his neck. This still shows the kindness of the meadowlark and how he helped out the Indian of long ago. This story means that kindness is good and shows for a long time. So if you ever see a Western meadowlark, they have a very distinct sound, like they're very actually pretty songbird call. It just very characteristic of when the summer is coming. And if you ever look, they have like yellow chests, and then you see the like speckled black. So the next time you see a Western meadowlark, you can appreciate them a little bit more. It's a very kind bird. All right, so the owl story. Among most tribes, it is believed that the owl is a bad bird. Every time there is going to be bad luck or death in a family, owl will always hang around a person's home. In the old days, when people depended on hunting for a living and an owl hung around a particular area, the hunter would seek another place to hunt because where he saw owl at his hunting grounds, he considered it bad luck to hunt there again. But really, owl isn't a bad bird because everything that Great Manitou put on this earth is supposed to help the red man in some way. In the past, when animals and birds could talk with people, owl told the story of why he hung around where bad luck was to come. This is his story told to a certain man. So this is owl talking. At one time, I was a very important bird. I had the gift of seeing in daylight or darkness and also had very good ears. I could hear people or birds or animals talk from a long way off. Many a time, some of these things I heard were wrong or were going to hurt someone. So I would talk about it right away and spread the word. Many people or birds or animals did not like this because many times I stopped a big fight or a lot of trouble. I was a very kind-hearted bird, always willing to help anyone, animal, or bird, or person. But as time went on, everything began to happen that was wrong, and I got the blame for it. They called me tattletale or big mouth or troublemaker. It was then that the head spirit of all spirits decided this wasn't working out, birds and animals talking like people. So speech was taken away from birds and animals, and they could only understand one another. So that's the end of the owl story. But to this day, whenever bad luck is going to strike any family, owl will hang around the home of the people, still hoping to help in some way. But owl can't talk. Nowadays, the people hate owl, thinking that he brings bad luck or even death. This is what owl told one man in the past. Some quiet nights, whenever a storm is coming, you can hear owl hooting his warning to people to prepare for the coming storm, to travels to look for shelter. So ends this owl story. So I really like that one because I feel like, again, the owl is misinterpreted sometimes as being a bad luck bird, but is actually very, very kind. And if you ever look at like zoology facts of the owl, the way their ears are like folded, I guess, by their ears, or the feathers by their ears are folded, allows them to hear really well. And that's why they're able to like hunt little mice and like easily get them. And so I think that's really cool that this was noted in that story, is that like the old people watch the animals enough to be like, that bird can hear really well. So anyway, just a little nerd fact. But, all right, let me go back to the main door. So we have one more door we can pick. So somebody, or not somebody, but chat, it's open to you. Go ahead and pick one last door. All right, we got 1-5 rolling in. Another 5 rolling in. Love it. We got 1 rolling in. Give you guys another 30 seconds. Another 5. Okay, 3 5s. Another 1 from my brother. I don't think I've seen my mom vote, so I'm gonna call her out and tell her to come vote. Just kidding. My mom's a really slow typer, so she's probably struggling there. Just kidding. Okay. All right. So it looks like 5 is the one. We have 3 5s and 2 1s. So we'll go ahead and talk about my favorite Indigenous artists. All right. So the first one, hands down, this is the one when I first started discovering Chippewa florals, this really well-established artist by the name of Christy Belcourt. She's a Métis artist from Canada. And these are just 2 screenshots I pulled from her website. And then you can see her painting and how large some of her work is. And there's some that are even bigger than this. And sometimes her work is mistaken for beaded because she uses little dots on her pieces. And they're just so like amazing and gorgeous. And every time I need like that fresh breath of like, I just need to look at Chippewa florals and just really be inspired by like the intricacy of some of the work out there. Her work is definitely like my go-to. Like I love Christy Belcourt. She does have a website, christybelcourt.com, or if you just Google her name, her website will come up. My second artist, I'm not going to pronounce her last name because I'm going to probably butcher it, but Emily. And so she's an Anishinaabe artist from the Saugeen First Nation. I might have butchered that too. But the thing I love about Emily's work is that she does both hand painted as well as digital. And so you can see one of her murals on the left where she's standing in front of it. And then you see some of her digital piece on the right. So again, if you look at her style, if you look at her style and how I talked about, there was a distinct art style called the woodland style. Her art is very characteristic of that, where you have repeated shapes within shapes. And then you also have those very like wispy lines characterized by like very, like her lines are very like contour. So they go thin and thick in areas. And so again, woodland style, like her style is very like reflective of that art style from Ojibwe and Anishinaabe territory. So you can also look at her work online too. She has done amazing work, amazing gigs for like across Canada. And I always love seeing what she comes out with next. And the final artist, I discovered him while I was taking a Native American art history course at the Institute of American Indian Arts. His name is Woodrow, but most people know him as Woody Crumbo. And so he is a Potawatomi artist from Oklahoma. And this like, the way he does his animals is just like chef's kiss. Like if you look at it, and again, just having those multiple like colors repeated within each other, the shapes, and then his very like distinct blue deer. And the fact that this was all hand illustrated, I'm just like blown away. And so if he had lived to like the digital era of graphic design, I know he would have made an excellent graphic designer. So love looking at his work. He does a lot of dancers. So if you ever need like references or like inspiration for like dancers, like he does really incredible work. So the only source that I really found for like his work is at the, I'm probably going to butcher it, the Gilcrease Museum. So they have a lot of his work and write a lot of things about him. So anywho, any questions? Thank you for hanging out an extra, 15-ish minutes. I appreciate you guys all staying here and listening to my let me talk about my career.
Kaylene, thank you so much. I really appreciate your thoroughness and being able to see where you're at through your entire creative artistic journey. I have a soft spot for anytime we reference our past selves, our younger selves, and so it's really, really cool to see the complete journey of your work. So thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. And yes, I look forward to the next 2 coming out. So
absolutely. Yes. The last note I'll just make really quick is next month we'll be meeting on February 11th, and our presentation will feature Ivy and Ivan McDonald. If you need to register, head on over to our website. You'll also find it on Facebook, and we'll share it in our newsletter and all the things. Thank you, Kaylene. And you'll also find this presentation on our YouTube after. Yeah, thank you. And have a wonderful rest of your day.